This program is brought to you by the Reeves Law Firm, representing you and your Social Security and disability needs. If you have a problem or questions regarding Social Security and disability, call attorney Anthony Reeves, toll free at 1-888-962-0007. Again, that's 1-888-962-0007. Or go to www.reevesfirm.com.
Welcome to another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability Today. I am your host, attorney Anthony Reeves. Let's get to your questions. What happens when I go to an evaluation that Social Security sends me to? The doctor finds me disabled, but they still say I'm not. Okay, I get this a lot, where people will go to an evaluation Social Security sends you to, and I've never seen it in writing quite like this, but I've never seen it in writing quite like this, but what will end up happening is the doctor, the claimant, you, will tell your representative or will say that, hey, I went to one of the Social Security's docs and the doc told me I'm disabled. And then all of a sudden I'm still denied. I don't understand. Okay, a couple of things you need to be aware of. First and foremost, did you see the report? And I always tell people, did you see the report? And most times they say, well, no. But that's what they told me. Did you see the report? And they're like, no. Okay, let me be blunt when I say this. This is like when two kids are sitting there standing in front of their parent and the lamp is broke. And each child says the other child doesn't. Who do you believe? You believe the fact that there's two children in the room and there's a lamp broken, and both of them have told you one thing for sure. One of the two of them broke that lamp. Who are you going to believe? Neither. Who gets punished? Both. And you're like, well, why? Because no one was there when the lamp broke except for those two kids. Only they know who, but neither one of them are coming clean. So you can only go with the evidence that you have before you. So when the judge or Social Security gets a report back and that report has no mention of a conversation or no mention of the doctor saying explicitly that you are disabled, especially the way you say the doctor said it, what do you think the judge is going to rely on? What's in the report? And I've had people say, they need to contact that doctor. I'm like, this doctor sees hundreds of people all the time. What's the likelihood they're going to remember you? And I'm not trying to be nasty. You're not their patient. So I stress that because a lot of times what happens is people get upset, and sometimes, and let me pause because I don't want anybody to think I'm telling them they're crazy. Sometimes what happens is the doctor will say something. The doctor will say something that gives the individual the idea that they're implying that they're disabled. And that's what the person will hear, and that's what the person will hold on to. And I always tell people, unless you see the report and see exactly what the report says, because that's really what everybody's going to rely on, the reports. If the report doesn't say it, guess what? It didn't. And not saying it didn't happen because you were there when it happened. I'm just saying that if it's not there, there's really not much recourse for anybody to determine whether or not it actually happened. But let's go back and backtrack. Let's say you have a report where the doctor says, I believe this person's unable to work. Now, I've seen that before. I've seen that. I've never had a client come to me and say the doctors told them that, but I've seen reports where the doctors have said, hey, this individual would have difficulty maintaining. They usually don't say they're disabled. They'll say something like, this individual will have significant difficulty maintaining competitive employment. It's a nice way of saying they're disabled. So guess what? You're thinking slam dunk. You're like, hey, you doing the party time. And this is what I tell people. It's the weight of the evidence. And you're like, what does that mean? Well, if you've got 10 doctors saying you're not disabled and you got one doctor that's saying that you are disabled, what do you think has more weight? One doctor saying you are, 10 doctors saying you're not. Tip the scales over. That means the bulk of the medical evidence says that you're not disabled. And that's where people get tripped up, is that I always tell people it's really more about what all of the evidence has to say, not just one thing. So please, because a lot of the times what happens is that when people go to a Social Security doctor, they're thinking that the weight or their chance for disability is going to basically all be determined by what this one doctor says. And I always said it's not that clean. They look at the weight of the evidence. That means they look at everything. So if you find yourself in a situation where you go before a doctor and the doctor gives you some indication they believe you're disabled, do not think automatically out of the gate that that's a slam dunk. Social Security has to look at everything in order to make that determination as to whether or not they believe that what that doctor says is supported by what everything else says. Remember the example. If one doctor says you're disabled, but then 10 say you're not, or 5 say you're not disabled, guess what? Do the math, do the scales. 1 says you're disabled, 5 says you're not disabled. So that means the scale is going to tip over. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. Now, I also have seen situations where one doctor says you're disabled, meaning the doctor for Social Security, but nobody else has said it. But again, you got to look at the medical records, because I'll have people say, well, nobody else has said it, but this is the only one doctor has. Again, they're going to look at specifically what the doctor from Social Security relied upon, or more importantly, what was his rationale for saying you're disabled. Then they're going to look at whether or not there's other medical evidence that supports the same thing. So let's give a good example. Let's say that you are saying you're disabled because of your back and an injury to your feet. And the doctor says, yeah, because of that, you're not able to work. Well, they're going to look to see, okay, did other doctors do any type of objective testing, whether it be x-rays, MRI, CT, CAT scans, nerve conduction studies, anything to show the significance of your back problems and your feet problems. If there's other evidence out there that shows severe impairments, and then let's say that there's also medication you've been prescribed, physical therapy, pain management, all those things collectively, even though nobody has specifically said you're disabled, but collectively due to the severity of the things you're receiving, gives a little bit more weight to what that doctor says. So again, I know this is kind of a lot of hoobly boop, and this is why I tell people, this is why a representative really can help you out when reviewing your file. Keep in mind this. If a doctor from Social Security tells you that you are disabled, do not think that you have a slam dunk. They have to look, they meaning Social Security, your entire file, to determine whether or not everything else supports what that doctor is saying. Stay tuned, and when we come back, let you know what show we're here next time. On our next Social Security Disability Today, we're going to talk about VA and Social Security and supplemental security income. Stay tuned, you're definitely going to want to check that out. Again, this is Attorney Anthony Reeves, and this is your Q&A Social Security Disability Today.